On June 21, 2025, President Donald Trump made a decisive and controversial move. He ordered United States military forces to conduct airstrikes against 3 of Iran's nuclear facilities. This operation, codenamed Operation Midnight Hammer, was a significant escalation in the long-simmering tensions between Washington and Tehran. The administration stated that the strikes were a necessary preemptive measure. They argued that intelligence showed Iran was close to developing a nuclear weapon, a red line the president had repeatedly warned against. The action was swift, and honestly, the world held its breath, waiting for the consequences of this bold military gamble. The immediate aftermath was filled with uncertainty and international debate. The decisions sent shockwaves across the globe and sparked a firestorm of discussion right here at home. For supporters, the strikes were seen as a show of strength and a fulfillment of Trump's promise to prevent Iran from becoming a nuclear power. They viewed it as a necessary action to protect American and allied interests in the Middle East, particularly those of Israel. Critics, however, voiced deep concerns. They argued that the strikes were a reckless act that could easily spiral into a much larger and more devastating regional conflict. They questioned the legality and the strategic wisdom of bypassing congressional approval for such a significant military operation. The days following the strikes were tense. Iran did not remain silent. It responded by launching retaliatory missile attacks against a U.S. military base located in Qatar. While initial reports indicated limited American casualties, the counterstrike immediately heightened fears of a tit-for-tat escalation that could draw both nations into a direct and prolonged war. This development transformed the political conversation in the United States. The focus shifted from the justification for the initial strikes to the potential for a new, large-scale American military engagement in the Middle East, a prospect that, honestly, many Americans have grown weary of over the past 2 decades. This rapidly evolving situation became the new focal point of the Trump presidency. Every statement from the White House and every development from the region was scrutinized. The president took to social media and television to defend his decision, framing it as a successful mission that neutralized a critical threat. He assured the American people that his actions had made the country safer. However, as news of Iran's retaliation spread, the public began to grapple with a complex set of questions. Did the president's actions truly prevent a future conflict, or did they just ignite one? This became the central issue that pollsters sought to understand in the days that followed. In the wake of the airstrikes, polling organizations quickly went into the field to gauge the American public's reaction. The results painted a complex and, somewhat contradictory picture of President Trump's standing. His overall job approval rating, which is a broad measure of how Americans feel about his performance, saw a slight but noticeable dip. Before the strikes, his approval hovered in a familiar range. However, polls conducted immediately after showed a small decline. For example, a Reuters Ipsos poll concluded on June 23 showed his approval at 41%, down a single point from earlier in the month, and marking the lowest point of his second term. It is important to look at several polls to get a clearer picture, as they can sometimes tell slightly different stories. While Reuters Ipsos showed a small drop, a Quinnipiac poll released on June 26 presented a different narrative. It found Trump's approval at 41%, which was actually a 3-point increase from their poll on June 11. Meanwhile, a poll from Qantas showed his approval slipping by 1 point to 47%, a change well within the margin of error. What this data suggests is that the strikes did not cause a dramatic collapse or a major surge in his overall support. Instead, they seem to slightly reinforce existing opinions, with a minor downward trend appearing in most averages. The numbers for disapproval tell a corresponding story. In the same Reuters Ipsos poll where Trump's approval fell to 41%, his disapproval rating rose to 57%. This indicates that while his base of support remained largely intact, some Americans on the fence may have been moved into the opposition camp by the military action. The Qantas poll also showed a 1-point increase in disapproval to 50%. These are not massive shifts, but in a deeply divided country, even small changes in public sentiment can have significant political implications, especially as they relate to issues of war and peace, which often resonate deeply with voters. Ultimately, the immediate polling data suggests that the Iran strikes did not provide President Trump with a significant rally round the flag effect. This phenomenon, where a president's approval rating temporarily increases during a major international crisis, did not fully materialize. His approval ratings remained within the general band they have occupied for much of his presidency, between the low to mid-40s. The slight dip in several key polls indicates that the action may have cost him a small amount of support, possibly from independent or moderate voters who are wary of new foreign entanglements and the risks that come with them. One of the most interesting takeaways from the polling data is the clear distinction Americans made between the specific military action and their overall view of President Trump. While his general job approval rating slightly declined, public support for the strikes themselves was surprisingly strong. A Qantas poll found that 47% of Americans approved of Operation Midnight Hammer, compared to just 36% who disapproved. This suggests that a significant portion of the country, including some who may not approve of the president's job performance overall, agreed with the decision to target Iran's nuclear program. This support was even more pronounced in an American Pulse poll, which found 57% backed the airstrikes. This support becomes clearer when we look at how people responded to the broader goal of the mission. The American Pulse poll also revealed that 56% of Americans approve of the efforts to stop Iran from obtaining nuclear weapons. This indicates that the objective of the strikes resonated with a majority of the public, even if they harbor reservations about the president who ordered them. The support was, as expected, highly partisan. The Qantas poll showed that 75% of Republicans approved of the strikes, while 61% of Democrats disapproved. This highlights the deep political polarization that defines nearly every major issue in the country today. However, this approval did not extend to President Trump's handling of foreign policy in general. A Quinnipiac poll found that only 40% of Americans approve of his overall foreign policy, while 54% disapprove. This is a critical distinction. It means that people could support a specific military operation they deemed necessary, while still lacking confidence in the president's broader diplomatic and military strategy. His approval rating for handling military affairs specifically was also underwater, with 45% approving and 49% disapproving. This suggests that the public trusts his individual decisions more than his overarching vision for America's role in the world. The numbers reveal a nuanced public opinion. Americans appear to have separated the act from the actor. They could agree with the strategic goal of preventing a nuclear Iran, and therefore support the limited airstrikes designed to achieve that end. At the same time, they could maintain their existing disapproval of President Trump's leadership style, his diplomatic approach, and his overall performance in office. This means the strikes were not a simple political win or loss for him. Instead, they were a specific policy that found favor, but that favor did not translate into a broader endorsement of his presidency. Despite the public's support for the limited airstrikes, there is significant anxiety about what might come next. Americans are deeply concerned about the possibility of the situation escalating into a full-blown war with Iran. The Qantas poll captured this apprehension clearly. 48% of Americans said they would oppose an escalation that involved sending U.S. ground troops, while only 43% would support such a move. This reveals a public that is supportive of decisive, contained action from the air, but is very hesitant to commit to another costly and prolonged ground conflict in the Middle East. The memory of past wars in Iraq and Afghanistan looms large in the national consciousness. This hesitance also extends to the United States' relationship with its allies, particularly Israel. The same Qantas poll asked whether the U.S. should continue providing aid to Israel if it risks greater American involvement in a regional conflict. The public was almost evenly split, with 43% opposing continued aid under those conditions and 41% supporting it. This division highlights the public's struggle to balance long-standing alliances with a growing desire to avoid being pulled into other nations' conflicts. People are weighing the benefits of strategic partnerships against the potential costs in American lives and resources, and there is no clear consensus on the right path forward. Perhaps the most telling question is whether President Trump's actions made Americans feel safer. Here, the public is deeply divided and leaning towards skepticism. According to the American Pulse poll, only 39% of people believe the world is a safer place after the strikes on Iran. In contrast, a larger group, 43% of Americans, said they believe the world is now less safe. This finding cuts to the heart of the debate over the president's strategy. While the administration argues that removing the threat of an Iranian nuclear weapon has enhanced global security, a plurality of the public fears that the action has instead made the world more volatile and dangerous. In conclusion, the decision to strike Iran has not provided President Trump with a clear political victory. While many Americans supported the specific action against Iran's nuclear facilities, this did not translate into higher overall job approval ratings for him. In fact, most polls show his approval numbers slightly worsened. Furthermore, the strikes have left the public feeling more anxious about the future, not less. A significant portion of the population fears that his actions have made another war more likely, and the world less safe. For a president seeking to bolster his standing, the strikes appear to have been a double-edged sword, a popular policy that ultimately failed to improve his connection with a wary and divided electorate.